Good morning. I'm with you on a Sunday morning today, normally on Saturdays, but yesterday was a full day for me, so I'm here with you on the Lord's Day. How about that? We're continuing on in our series of homiletics, how to preach, and today I want to talk to you about delivery, and we're going to cover some areas that probably you'll never hear from a pulpit, or maybe even in a classroom. And my goal and intention with you is for preachers that could be aspiring in the ranks and gaining some expertise on this, but also those of you that have been preaching, maybe you can glean from some things that I'm sharing over the course of these weeks. So let's dive in today. I want to talk about three things that have to do with delivery, how you are presenting your sermon, your message. And the first thing is the voice. You have to have a voice, right, as a preacher. So that is the principal tool, is the voice. And it's controlled in four ways. There is pitch, there is rate, there is volume, and there is tone quality. Let's look at pitch first. Pitch is highness or lowness. Usually lowness is more pleasant and soothing to an audience when you're speaking in that kind of tone. High-pitched tends to be associated with pain or emergency. It produces tension. But a low pitch, as I mentioned, is more soothing to an audience. You know that. I left a meeting one time when I was in North Carolina about 30 years ago. There was a gal preaching, which I was fine with that, but she screamed at us for something like 25 minutes, and my wife and I both had enough, and we got up and left. The pitch was so irritable to the ears, we just couldn't handle it anymore. So pitch is important. Another one is volume, loudness. John Garlock, the homiletics professor that I had, and which I'm getting a lot of these notes from, said we need to speak 15 to 20% louder than necessary when preaching. Why? You got people coughing in an auditorium. Some people don't hear as well as others. You've got distractions, people getting up using the bathroom or something like that, which, by the way, when that happens, never go to them and look, because your audience is going to be looking at you and they're going to be saying, what's he looking at? So that's just a distraction as well. You see, these things I'm sharing today are very practical for you. So you've got loudness. You've got the rate. You want to speak slower than you should if the audience is big. If you have like a machine gun style, and I've heard preachers do this, very difficult to process. You're trying to think through what they just said, and they're on to two or three other things almost in the same breath. So slow down, especially if you've got a lot of people in an auditorium, and speak more slowly when you've got a lot of people. And then tone quality is similar to pitch, but it is also used in the sense where you want to just have a comfortable speaking style. As I mentioned, the woman who was screaming at us, I wondered if anybody else left that auditorium. But that's not what you want to do. You want to have a tone quality that's comfortable. Think of yourself. If you're in the congregation, say, how would you adjust to somebody, with a poor tone quality? You'd maybe sit in there for a while, try to make the adjustment, and you're going to lose people. So those four things, pitch, volume, rate, and tone quality, are very important. I personally like a conversational style where, like I'm doing in a teaching, but in preaching it's different. Again, there are times when you can increase intensity and things like that. That's fine. But I wouldn't do that for the whole sermon because it's going to grate on people. Let me also mention a microphone. Wireless microphones can be good, or in the sense of public speaking, because you have more bodily movement. And you don't have to deal with cords like if you were holding a microphone. If you don't have that, you have to adjust to a mic that you're holding. Now, the first thing you need to do is get together with your sound person and make sure they're doing their job, that the sound comes out good. Garlock said one of the things you never do is tap on a microphone. He was a stickler about that. He said a microphone is delicate and expensive, and by banging on it to see if it's working, that's not a good thing to do. You speak into it, okay? That is how you'll know if it's working or not. Testing, 1, 2, 3, or whatever. If you don't want to do that, say people are already in, you could just say, "Good morning, everybody," and see how that sounds. So microphones, very important. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. The other thing I want to mention is the ways in which we communicate. That is with not just with the voice, what was the word here I was going to use? Gestures. Our body presence, the way we posture ourselves. I guess that's the word I'm looking for here, our posture. First of all, with that is you need to be alert. You want your audience to be alert, right? You don't want people looking around and, hoping to get out of there sometime soon. You want to draw interest. So you need to look alert. And on that phase, you don't want to be slumping over, hanging onto the pulpit. You want to stand erect. That's very, very important. Because if you present an image in which you really don't care about the occasion, the other people that you're preaching to are going to pick up on that. If he doesn't care much about it, why should I? So being alert is very, very important. Make sure you don't lean on that pulpit because it just looks unprofessional. The other thing is what you're looking at. Now, young preachers, not very experienced, they'll look at the ceiling or maybe a spot on the wall or something like that because they're afraid of eye contact. And you'll get used to that more and more. You need to look at people's faces when you're preaching. If you're looking at a spot on the wall way in the back, it looks as if you're nervous. And that's uncomfortable for an audience. So get used to looking at people's faces. And not just the ones that you see are responsive, or your wife or your family. You need to look at everybody. And what I will do is kind of scan the audience. You're looking like this all the way across and, making eye contact with people, even on the back row. Why is it that Christians always seem to be drawn to the back row, even if there's not a lot of people in the service? I've noticed that. You almost feel like, hey, everybody, let's get up front here. But, that makes them uncomfortable. So that's what you want to do. Posture is important here. Not slumping, not looking away from people. You want to look at their eyes. And then lastly with this is the expression. The eyes are the expression of the face. So by doing that, you're looking in people's eyes. You're communicating with eyes. And along with that is the gestures. Gestures are very important. John Garlock spent a lot of time on that. What is that? It's hand gestures. Example, you're preaching on 1 Samuel 17, David encountering the giant Goliath. You could say something like, here's David, probably a 15-year-old scrawny kid going out to meet a 10-foot giant. You see what I just did there? I did two things. Gesturing, like illustrations, can open up windows in people's minds. And if you noticed, I changed the tone quality of my voice for emphasis, a little bit more intensity in talking about a 10-foot giant that this kid was going to fight. So you want to create those kind of pictures, and gestures are important. You don't want to have your hands behind your back. Brother Garlock would say that would cause cramping in your lung cavity because your shoulders rotate. I mean, he had this thing down to a science. So you want to have your hands, if they can be free with a wireless microphone, the better. If they can't, at least you have one hand free if you're holding a mic. Don't gesture with the hand with the mic going, like this. You may lose it. And that's the only thing they'll remember of that day. Not what you said, but what you did. He lost the mic. So you don't want to do that, and you don't want to trip moving around a lot behind a pulpit with a cord. You can get your feet tangled up in them and stumble. So again, a lot of this is practical stuff, but we need to be aware of it. So those three things are important as well. The gestures, the eyes, the voice, and by doing it, you want to make the people as comfortable as possible. Okay? That's the goal here when they're listening to you. So gestures are used for emphasis. They're to underline emotion. And you need to make them high sometimes because that pulpit may be right up here. So you want to use your hands above your head sometimes, which is what I just did with Goliath. All right. What else can I tell you here? I want to talk a couple of minutes here about interpreters. Say you have the tremendous opportunity to go to a foreign country and they ask you to preach. And yet English is a second language to the people there, and not everybody will speak it. So you need an interpreter. The best thing for you to do is to meet with him prior to the service. Show him your outline, your points, maybe some key scriptures, some words that he may have difficulty. So you want to make it easy as possible for him as well. Now, with the interpreter, I've noticed sometimes they want to manage the service. It's their opportunity to preach, or so they think, even though they're interpreting for you. So you need to make sure they're interpreting word for word as much as possible. Sometimes you'll say a sentence or two and they'll go on and on. I found out one time they were adding to what I was saying. So I learned from that. When you meet with them beforehand, say exactly what I'm saying. Don't put your 2 cents worth, if I can use that, in there, because that may change the complexion of the sentence. Another thing is with the microphone. A lot of times in foreign countries, they only have one microphone. Give it to the interpreter. The people need to hear him, what he's saying in their own language. You can speak, and when you do speak, only use a couple of sentences at the most. Make sure the grammar is fine, okay? You don't want to throw, vocabulary in there that is going to get lost in the translation. And you want to stop and let him do his job. When you stop and he's interpreting, don't look at him, okay? Because that can throw you off. When's he going to finish? You keep looking, you keep making eye contact with your audience. So don't look at the interpreter, that can derail you. All right. Another thing with an interpreter, you want to make sure he knows where you're going with the service. Say you're giving an altar call. It's not just the message, it's the takeaway, as we mentioned in a previous lesson, the application. I'm going to give an altar call at the end of this message. Tell him prior to the service so he can be prepared for that. Remember, you want to make it as easy as possible for him as well, because that's going to reflect on you. All right, so you may never have that opportunity, but if you do, these are some tips to help when you're in a situation like that. Don't use American idioms. You know, he threw a monkey wrench into the works. He found himself shooting himself in the foot. Those don't go over in Africa. Okay, they'll have no idea what you're talking about. Shooting yourself in the foot with a gun is crazy. So avoid those. Those are American idioms. You need to be culturally relevant to the people that you're speaking with. You may pick up some in conversation, in fellowship, or something like that. I've done that in the past. But don't use American idioms, because the interpreter is going to look at you like, what are you talking about? You don't want to create confusion in a foreign setting, because then you'll lose the people. So those are just some of the things I've learned with delivery. The delivery is very important. You want to change your voice for emphasis. That is very important. If you just speak in a regular, almost a monotone style, you're going to lose people. You want to have the right posture. You want to be erect. You want to be, being alert, not leaning on anything. You don't want to change things. You want to stay, pretty much what they know, what they're used to. And also speak slowly, the volume. All right, and the microphone, very, very important, because you need amplification. It makes me appreciate a guy like George Whitefield, who spoke in England and America, 1740s, 50s, 60s, without any amplification. And it was said, even by people like Benjamin Franklin, who sat in on some of his sermons, he could be heard a mile away. He learned the power of the voice. And another thing I learned about Whitefield was he came out of an acting background. So the gestures to him were very normal and apropos. He knew, he was a master at communication. So we may not aspire to a George Whitefield, but some of these things can help you when you are asked to speak, teach, preach, even giving a testimony. You want to make that interesting, right? You don't want to sit there and be dull and people are waiting for the next thing in the service. So I hope this helped you today. And I think I'm going to end this series next week. I thought I was going to do it today, but I have a couple of more things I want to share. Weaknesses of young preachers. When they get up and they have too much of this or too much of that, it deludes from the message. So I want to share that with you, maybe a couple of other things, and we'll conclude this series. Hope you're enjoying it. All right, God bless. Have a great week.